What's up everyone, welcome to this new video. In this video I'm going to discuss 5 chess openings which are just great for beginning chess players. I will start off with 2 kind of main traditional openings which you can really use to master opening principles and get a higher rating in general, of course. And then I will discuss 2 kind of more aggressive, fun, gambit-like openings which are also great for winning games very quickly and they're just fun to play. And then the last one I will discuss is a little bit of a surprise. I won't give it away too much right now. Make sure to check it out for sure, of course. It's a really fun opening, very tricky opening, which not a lot of people know. It's never been played against me, and it gets me great results every time I play it. Now, before we jump into the openings, I want to quickly address that I'm going to basically discuss the main ideas and principles in the openings. I won't go in too much detail in the opening, but of course, if you see any opening you like, let me know in the comments, so I can make a more detailed video on it, or simply check out other YouTube creators or books and stuff like that to really master the opening. The first opening we're going to take a look at is the London opening. Now, the London opening is one of my favorite openings to teach to beginners because it combines a lot of opening principles and it is very versatile in the sense that you can play it against pretty much anything black plays against you. To play the London opening, the first move you're going to make is d4. Simply one of the main moves white can play as the first move, alongside of course e4, and the point is to control a central square. e5 as well as d4, it's protected by the queen. Now, of course black already has many options here, but the main move we're going to look at is d5, which is the most played move against d4. Now here we want to play the typical London move, which is bishop f4. And after black makes a similar move like bishop f5, we want to play knight f3. And these 3 moves basically assemble the London opening, at least the beginning of the opening. We have a central pawn, which is very strong, and we have 2 pieces developed towards the center. Now, all these pieces actually stare towards e5, which will be a very important square later on in the opening. Now again, in this position there are plenty of moves black can play. They can try and develop their knights, they can push one of their central pawns, or the other central pawn rather. But let's say black keeps copying us and plays knight f6. Now here there are basically 2 things we want to achieve in the rest of the London opening. Excuse me. We want to protect our central pawn and we want to finish our development. Now what does this look like usually? We want to play e3. Again, black can copy us. We want to develop our bishop. Now of course now there is a stare down between the bishops, but because both bishops are protected, it really doesn't matter. We don't have to do anything about this because of course if black takes, we can just take back. And if black decides to do nothing about it and plays, for example, bishop e7, well, we can take, we don't have to, we can just also keep going with our development basically. We can castle, for example, bring our king to safety, and we don't really have to react to the bishops staring at each other. Now, black can castle as well, and here we want to play, well, a move we want to play here is knight to d2, basically finishing off our development. But of course, if you play knight e2 now, black can actually take and kind of ruins our pawn structure. So we want to kind of wait with this move, and instead we can play, for example, c3. Now black again can play a move like c5, and here we can kind of decide what we want to do. We can trade off the bishops to basically assure we can finish our development, but we can also wait with the development of our knight. But this is mainly the setup we're going to, well, have in the London opening. So to quickly elaborate on this opening, the main points of this opening is to basically have a very strong central pawn. Our d4 pawn is well protected by kind of this pyramid-like structure in which both e3 and c3 defend the pawn. Besides that, all of our pieces are developed, except for this knight of course, but we can play this, we can get this knight into the game at any point now. We can even play maybe knight a3, although it's not really a great square. So we might in this position want to trade off our bishops and then develop the knight. But basically all our pieces are developed. They're all in great squares. They're all looking at kind of the center, which is kind of the point of this opening. We have our king in safety, our pieces are well developed towards the center, and our pawns are very strong. Now one last thing I wanted to share about the London opening. I'm recording this afterwards because I kind of forgot about this, but one of the main things why I like this opening so much is because you can play it basically against anything. I mainly discussed playing the London against d5, but even after like black plays a more modern opening like g6 and bishop g7, you can still play the London opening, which makes it so versatile and great, in my opinion, because you only have to learn kind of the basic setup in the London opening, and you can play it against basically anything. In this variation, you can even both get the bishop to d3 and get your, let's say, c5 and get your knight to d2 and complete kind of the whole London setup. You can play the London against basically anything, which makes it a great opening. Now that's it for the London opening. Of course, there's many more to learn about it, and I would highly recommend diving deeper into the London opening, trying to play it for yourselves and see how it goes. It's a very good choice for white. But let's move on to the second opening I want to discuss, and this will be an opening for black. Now this will be the Scandinavian opening. The Scandinavian opening goes as follows. White plays e4, and we immediately challenge the center with d5. Now here, basically the only good move here for white is to take the pawn. You will face sometimes maybe even moves like e5 or d3, but the main move and the most played move and the best move for white is simply taking the pawn. Here we want to take back with the queen, and basically the only move you will face is knight to c3, attacking our queen. Now here there are a couple of moves for black. One of the main moves is, for example, queen a5. I personally don't really like this move because further into the game, this queen on a5 can be a little bit of a liability, and you have to be very careful for sure. If you're a beginner, it's easy to forget about the queen, and after, for example, even moves like this, you can already imagine that this is quite dangerous. Although, of course, after a move like c3, there's not much to worry about, but I often see that people simply forget about their queen, and after a move like this, they simply take, for example, the knight and they lose their queen. So I'm not going to recommend this. I'm going to recommend another move, which is also fine, which is the move queen back to d8. Now the reason why I like the Scandinavian opening so much is that it's very easy to play. Now, of course, you can argue that white already is better. They can, for example, play d4 and they have a nice pawn in the center, and their knight is also developed, and we really haven't done anything, it seems. But I really like this opening because we can get some very easy and quick development. We just want to make normal developing moves you often make anyways in any kind of opening. You want to make simple moves in a sense. So for example, we can simply play knight f6. White will do similar things. They can develop the bishop. A move that is important is e6, basically because we want to prevent white from playing d5 themselves. So for example, if we play a knight to c6 here, although this might not be like a winning move for white, it can be very annoying. So we want to kind of prevent that. So instead of knight c6 right away, we kind of want to play e6. Now again, white will do similar things. We can even pin, for example, knight. Again, white will keep developing their pieces. We can simply castle, and we get simply into a normal position. Now the reason why I like this opening so much, even after moves like this, is because the moves are quite simple. If you go into some kind of Italian or Spanish or more closed game, you often have to really know the moves and know the opening theory. And in the Scandinavian opening, one of the things I love about it is that you can just make simple moves whatever white does. Even though, again, white has the initiative and has a better pawn in the center and a developed knight, and we really don't have anything. There is no way really for white to attack black immediately. It's often quite easy to consolidate and just get a normal position in the Scandinavian. That's why I like it so much. I would just recommend, as I said, just developing our pieces. I'm not going to go too deep into any specifics here, but I just really like the fact that we can simply, again, make moves that make sense and are very principled, which I really like. For sure, if you want to learn more about openings and about the game in chess in general, you want to mainly focus on learning basic concepts and theories, such as like developing your pieces towards the center, making sure you develop all your pieces, get your king to safety, and just play a game of chess. Now again, just like the London opening, there's much more to explore in the Scandinavian opening. There's so many interesting lines and stuff like that, but I basically want to explain the main ideas and openings, and if you like them, make sure to well, look on the internet, read books about it, learn much more about it. I'm in no way or shape an expert in these openings, but I think they're very good for beginners to learn as kind of a basic opening to practice and play in games. Okay, so the first aggressive gambit-like opening we're going to discuss is the fried liver opening, which occurs after simply reaching a normal Italian position, which occurs after knight f3, of course e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and now the move black has to play for us to go into the fried liver is knight to f6. Now, what we want to play here is knight g5, and the point of knight g5 is simply to attack the pawn. That's why I love this gambit, this opening. It's not really a gambit for white, it's simply aggressive opening, is because the idea is very concrete. We simply want to take this pawn and fork the rook and the queen. And the great thing about this is that although black has a defense for this, it's not really obvious. The first move black can play is bishop c5, which simply looks like a blunder, because if we take, we fork the queen and the rook, and it looks like black is losing material. But here, well, black can take on f2, which is called the Traxler opening, which is very, very complicated. It leads to very crazy and insane lines. So if you're not prepared for this, please don't go into this, because it's very dangerous for white, although we might win material. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, not at all actually, because I mainly want to take a look at whenever black doesn't find the moves, which it most likely won't if you're playing against a beginner anyways. So the second move black can try, which is kind of the main move to defend against the fried liver, is d5. But even here there are some like crazy lines. For example, this. I actually made a video on this, so if you want to learn more about kind of the advanced lines in the fried liver, make sure to check it out. I will leave a link into the description. But this again is very wild, and kind of the point I'm trying to make is that the defense is not very clear for black, because if black is going to play d5 or bishop c5, they already have to know some advanced lines in this opening, which most beginners don't know. Most beginners simply don't know how to defend against, well, the threat of us taking the pawn on f7, because if they make just a simple move like d6 or even h6, we're simply going to take the pawn and fork the rook and the queen. And there is not much black can do about it. Of course, here black has to move the queen and we will take the rook. So I would highly recommend trying this opening. You will be surprised at how many beginners will actually fall for this trick and don't know how to defend against it. Now the second aggressive gambit-like opening I'm going to discuss is called the Englund gambit. This time it's actually a gambit, unlike the last one, which was more like an aggressive opening. This one is actually a gambit. It occurs after white plays d4, one of the main moves for white of course, and here we play e5. Now this kind of looks like a Scandinavian, which we discussed after of course e4 and d5, but the main difference here of course is that if white takes, which is the best move, the move everybody will play basically, we cannot recapture the pawn, right? In the Scandinavian we were able to take back with the queen. Here, well, we're not able to take back the pawn in any way. So instead of that, we wanna attack the pawn with knight to c6. Now most players with white will simply try and defend the pawn, which is a good strategy in general of course. For sure if they can also develop the pieces, right? Knight f3, defending the pawn, also developing the knight. And after a move like queen e7, that's the move you want to play here. Attacking the pawn once more. White will most likely defend the pawn with bishop f4. Again, defending the pawn and also developing a piece. Now, it looks like we cannot really attack the pawn anymore, right? If we play like a move like d6, well, although we attack the pawn, white can simply take. He can take back, but, well, okay. But the pawn is defended, of course. But this isn't great for us, because we're simply down the pawn. So instead of that, we want to give a check. We want to play queen to b4. Now on the surface, this already kind of looks like it wins material, because we attack the king as well as the bishop. So you will actually be surprised by how many players will simply play a move like c3 or knight c3 and simply blunder their bishop, for sure if they're beginners of course. Now this of course isn't the main gambit, but it's, well, important to know of course that if white makes a move like c3, we can simply pick up the bishop and be up material, which is great of course. But instead, white can of course defend against this by playing bishop to d2. defending against a check and also simply attacking our queen. Now the move we want to make here is queen takes b2. Now so far all the moves white have played are good and also natural. They're like the most obvious moves white can play. And if they continue doing that, they will blunder. Because the main move which white will look at and most likely play is bishop to c3. And this is a mistake. This simply loses the game on the spot for white. And again, this is the kind of the obvious move white wants to make, but it doesn't work. Because we can play bishop to b4. Now of course white cannot take our queen, because well, the bishop is pinned by our own bishop. So instead of that, white has to do something else. A very popular way white can try to defend against this is by playing queen to d2, simply trying to defend the bishop twice and also still remaining kind of defending the rook here, right? But here we can simply take the bishop, and after the queen takes back, which seems like the best move, we simply have checkmate in 1 after queen to c1. Now of course white doesn't have to allow the checkmate, but even if they don't, and for example after we take the bishop here, they take back with the knight, we simply win a rook. And even here white has more possibilities to blunder, because if they for example block with the queen, we simply take the knight, which isn't great. So they most likely will play knight to d1, defending against a check and also not losing their knight. But here we can even take the pawn, and after the trades we're simply up a rook, and this should be easily winning for us. Now of course after we've played kind of our trap, this is already winning, but after we played bishop to b4, white doesn't have to play queen d2, which again is not a great move because it wins material at least for us. So instead of that, white can capture the bishop, and here instead of taking the rook, we want to take the bishop. Because the problem here for white is that it isn't easy to defend this rook, right? I mean, white basically has to move the knight. And if it goes to the most natural square, which is basically the only square where it cannot be captured, right? Because if white simply goes to c3, we can simply take, and here white, funny enough, still loses the rook. And of course, if white goes to decide to a3, we can still simply take the knight and be up a knight, which is great for us. And there is even an attack still going on, right? We can still give checks and so on. So instead of that, white might think that after knight to d2, everything is kind of saved, right? I mean, the rook is defended by the queen and we don't really have any checks with our queen. But here, dynamite strikes again. We can simply take the pawn. It's almost smothered mate, except for the fact that, well, white has to sacrifice their queen. And here, well, we simply win a queen for a knight and a pawn, which is again great for us. So there are many variations which are just great for us, which wins us a bunch of material in this line. What I will do is quickly share the line which defends for white. Now, so far, these are all, it's noteworthy that these are all natural moves, and you will face this a lot because they're all the main moves white will play. And after we take here, instead of playing bishop c3, which immediately blunders again, white has to play knight c3. Now, this kind of looks like it saves everything, right? Because, well, the rook is defended and black doesn't really have any checks with the queen. Again, we have to be careful though if we're playing this with white, because still knight b4 is going for the same trick basically, because after, let's say, a lazy move like a3, we can still smother the king. White again is forced to take the knight and lose their queen, which you don't want to allow if you're white. So instead of that, they're basically, you have to defend this pawn basically. So there are two moves. The main move here is knight to d4, simply defending the pawn. And now the attack really is kind of gone. There isn't really any way to put more pressure on this pawn or on the king. And you can even play rook c1 to defend against any checks and tricks against white's king. Now the final opening we're going to take a look at is kind of a surprise opening, I guess. I really haven't seen anyone play this, at least against me, and I think this is a little bit more of an unknown opening. Like the London Scandinavian opening, even the fried liver is one of the most popular traps, as well as the Englund gambit. It's quite notable. A lot of people know this trap, which also means that a lot of people know what to do against it, although of course new players in chess, they of course often don't know it, which makes the trap so great. With the opening I love, and I think is great, and it will catch your opponents off guard and will win you the game very quickly. It's called the Blackburn Shilling opening, and it kind of occurs after an Italian opening. It's actually a trap with the black pieces. I'll actually show it from the black perspective, and it follows kind of a normal Italian setup, just like the fried liver in a sense. But this time, of course, the trap isn't for white, but for black. And the funny thing here is that it kind of looks like a fried liver for white, and it looks like a better fried liver for white, sorry, because here we play the move knight to d4. This is the main move in the Blackburn Shilling gambit, because here white can take. Now this looks like an improved version of the fried liver, right? Because, well, they have the same idea of taking here and forking the queen and the rook. And they also want a pawn immediately. So this looks great. And almost everybody who sees this and is familiar with the fried liver, or they don't even have to be familiar with the fried liver, they will see that this pawn is hanging, they will take it. They will also quickly realize that, well, black is in a lot of danger. They think they won the game immediately. But here we play a very nice move, queen to g5. Now, the reason why I love this move so much is that it kind of reinforces, well, for white to take the pawn, right? Because, well, although you can say, right, we move the queen, so this fork is gone. After queen to g5, the fork is still alive. If white takes, the queen and the rook are still forked, which makes it even more convincing for white to go for this. Now, if white doesn't take and plays a move like castles, because of course our queen is staring at the king's side, attacking the pawn, well, we simply win the knight. So this is winning for us, and we should be very happy if we achieve this. But of course, it's more fun to go for the checkmate, to go for the immediate win, of course. So most people will play knight takes f7. And here, we want to take the pawn. Now, the point here is that after white takes the rook, of course, we can simply take the rook from white itself. And this is very dangerous for white, because here we have a very nice follow-up to winning the rook back, which is to take the pawn. Now here, white only has two ways to defend against, well, the check, which is, of course, queen blocks. Here we can simply take the queen, and we're up a queen, which, of course, is completely winning. And the second most likely move white will play is bishop to e2. And here we have a very fancy move we can play, which is d5. You can even play d6, I think. It doesn't really matter. The main point of this move is we open up our bishop. Now, what you might notice is that, well, white is completely underdeveloped. The only developed piece is kind of the knight here, as well as the bishop, of course, although the bishop is pinned. But this is very bad for white, sorry, because our main idea, and this is basically unpreventable, is for us to bring the bishop into the game. Now here white has a couple of ways to try and defend their position. The main way they will try it is either by playing f3, which is a very bad move in general, of course, or d6, or sorry, d3. And if they play this, attacking black's queen, we are going to play knight to f3. Now, this is a great move, simply because it forces the king to f1, and now we have checkmate. Kind of hang our queen, although by giving all these checks, white doesn't have the time to recapture capture the queen in general, and here it's simply checkmate. Now the same thing kind of happens after our opponent plays f3. It kind of delays the checkmate, because after we go into the same sequence, white will have this square on f2, but you can kind of see that this is completely winning. We're up a pawn, our opponent is under attack. We can even play a move like bishop c4 check, and, well, white is forced to give up material in one way or another. Here it's forced to give up another pawn, and the best move here is actually to take the bishop with the queen. Now we capture back. Of course, white gets a little bit of material back here, but we're up simply 5 points of material, which should be plenty enough for sure, because, well, all the pieces are underdeveloped. The knight is still in the corner and is kind of trapped, so this is great for us. Now, the only other thing I'm going to look at, let's scroll back here, in this particular gambit, is if white, instead of taking the rook, will play a move like rook, after we take the pawn. They don't take the rook, they will play rook f1 to kind of, here they kind of realize how dangerous the attack is, so they want to defend this pawn, and they are not going for material here. But here we have kind of the same sequence here, which is to take, and here it's very nice. If white blocks with the queen, we take the queen with the knight, and we simply are up a queen, which should be plenty enough for us to win the game. And a nice finishing touch I like to show is if white plays bishop e2, we have smothered mate, which is probably the most beautiful mate you can have. The bishop, of course, is pinned, so they cannot take our knight, and the king has no squares to move to. Now, just like the Englund gambit, I wanted to include also a way for white to deal with this opening. So if you're white and you're facing this opening, you can play it. And the main way to deal with the Blackburn shilling gambit with white is to simply not take the pawn, but take the knight. This simply gets rid of all the tricks black has, and it will end you up with lead and development, and black also has doubled pawns, which is quite bad for black and very good for white. Now these are the 5 openings I wanted to share with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Maybe you will pick up 1 or more openings to try for yourselves. I would highly recommend it. And yeah, thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe and all that good stuff, and see you next time.